when we get the opportunity to have people share their stories with us, like what a gift to be able to reflect back a little bit of what you heard so that one, they know you were listening, and two, you might be helping them to learn something that they just didn't see in themselves. So I feel like your podcast probably does that a lot for people.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And folks, it's wintertime. If you're going back and reviewing the shows, in the summer and you're sitting down at the beach, just know that it's cold and snowing. And as I said in the green room to everybody, I'm distracted during the snowstorm because I'm OCD about shoveling. Probably because those 2 or 3 times that I waited on Camden to get out and shovel meant that we had ice in the driveway.
Is that what it is? I was thinking it was more you were worried if the Russians showed up right now, you wouldn't be able to mobilize in time.
Don't worry, I still got my Abati charges all set up. So
all right.
The Russians ain't coming down the driveway. Neither are the Chinese, them communists. That's right, folks. They are communists. Check it out. It says they're communists. But anyway, we ain't going to get into that because I will dive down that deep hole, whether it's rabbits, gophers, or snakes. And I'll be there a long time. I wanted to spend some time talking with Jessica. Yeah. And getting my tongue working. You think after all that BSing and running around I just did that my tongue would work. But she has a highly complicated name, apparently, that my tongue does not want to say this morning. Miss Jessica Adams joining us. How you doing, Jessica?
Hi there. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. And Jessica is actually a super common, popular name. So normally it rolls right off the tongue. So I'm guessing it was the snow that was distracting you right there.
Yeah. My tongue gets distracted by the snow. And oh, by the way, my daughter-in-law, Camden's wife, happens to be named Jessica too. So it's not like I don't get practice saying that name.
She won't watch this. Don't worry. You're only offending one, Jessica.
There we go.
It's all good.
That's right. And I only got to be nice to this Jessica for the next hour or so. Isn't that right? Jessica, and speaking of being nice to you, I am, there's folks, if you ain't figured this out watching, listening to our show, there's always just this one little thing that when I'm checking up on folks that jumps out at me. Never know what it is. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. This one's about halfway in between. What the heck's up with Yella? I mean, I just got it, and go ahead and say just her business is Discover Yella, folks. And yes, you can talk about it, but I just want to know why Yella? Why not pink, blue, orange?
Yeah.
Maroon or something else.
All right. Well, I'll do my best. I would love to say it's a grand, complicated, a lot of thought behind it. In some ways, I guess it does have a lot of thought behind it, but in a lot of ways, it's also very simple. And to be honest, I think that is very fitting, both me personally and this as a business. I really don't like to overcomplicate things. I think oftentimes we do that naturally just by default. I think we live in a world that sometimes wants to overcomplicate things for us and throw us a lot of distractions. And so the yellow behind Discover Yellow was really an attempt to start a business that really stood on top of so many years of professional development work that I had been doing inside a large organization for over 16 years. Where self-awareness, and you guys will know this very clear in the leadership world, self-awareness it's the foundation. If we don't know, we can't grow. And in this world that we live in, where things really are kind of thrown at us, we're thrown into things, we often live in a world of distractions. So my goal when starting a business was to keep many of the professional development elements that I think are so tried and true in growing teams and leading teams and growing as a leader and developing yourself personally and professionally. The idea came to help give people space. And so that's where it started, is where do you find space? And very simply, driving through a traffic light, red tells you to stop, green tells you to go, and yellow is the opportunity for a bit of a pause. It's an opportunity to decide, are you going?
It's not where you hit the gas and go.
It depends, right? And this is the element of self-awareness that's so great. The analogy there works so well because it is an opportunity for a moment of pause. It fits with the reflective work that we do. Sometimes you do make the decision to go, and there could be a lot of justification and right reasons for that. Sometimes you make the decision to stop. And in that pause, how do you use that time at the red light? So it became this idea of, instead of, naming something space, because to be honest, I actually started, green is my favorite color. I started with the concept of using green. I naturally gravitate towards that color. But green space started sounding very environmental. It sounded maybe like plants and other things of that. There's
or even money.
Or even
there's a plant store in Tucson called Green Space, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly. So anyway, I have to give my sister credit. I always do. She is my creative partner in a lot of think tank sessions when it comes to just life in general. But between a lot of back and forth conversations, the idea of the traffic light really came to fruition. I happened to be out on a walk while we were talking about this, and I turned to the left. It was fall time. I turned to the left, and there's two beautiful trees filled with nothing but yellow leaves. And it was sort of that solidified moment of like, you know what? Yellow is awesome. And yellow was great, but I am a very action-oriented person. And I do believe that there is a lot to discover in the journey of life if we allow ourselves to continue learning. So as you mentioned, the lifelong learner, I very much resonate with that. We're dynamic humans. I think we owe it to ourselves to be curious and learn and live and do life in ways that are meaningful. So discover was just a perfect addition to yellow. So that's how we came to the name.
I'd love to kind of dive in a bit on the space idea, creating space, having that opportunity to pause and all that. But you even mentioned this, and something, Dad, we've talked about this a bunch, but also having that propensity towards action. And I think that is such a interesting balance because, I think a lot of people think that the people who love to take action, a lot of people who love to take action have trouble pausing. They can't stop. They always need to be working. They need to throw a shot at you, Dad. They need to go shovel the snow right now. things like that, right? There's always something that you want to go do. How do you make that space for those pauses while still I don't know, because it's one thing to make the space, but then it's another thing to then still have the intensity of the action when you do take the action.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And to know how to use the space well. I think that's a lot of, when I'm facilitating workshops or I do host long weekend retreats for women as well, or I'm working within an organization and a team, a lot of the invitation, if you will, to creating a pause or having space is the invitation to figure out how to use it well in ways that are meaningful. So if it's an opportunity for a refuel, I talk a lot about margin. I think it is important to have these natural pauses built in our day. It could look at something as simple as we finish recording this podcast, and before we jump into our next activity, we take even 30 seconds, a minute, a few minutes to pause, to reflect on what we just did, to maybe celebrate a little bit of gratitude for something that we just did, to send a little thank you email for what we just did. A variety of things can fall into those categories, but I like to think about the pause in kind of ways of transition, the margin and the transition. I use this example sometimes, and it might sound silly, but I'm a mom of two young kiddos who are 12 and 10. And the end of our day, it's been a long day. We're up early, we're shuffling to school, working parents come back, we have evening activities. And I know that when I walk from my bottom steps to the top steps, I am required to then be in mode of now bedtime, whatever that looks like. And I want to be there for my kids, but I also recognize that by that time of the day, I can be a little depleted, if I'm really honest. I'm kind of saturated in a lot of ways. And I think we can all feel that. And I tend to be a person, as much as I will talk about space and creating margin, I tend to be a person who can pack a pretty full schedule. In some ways, I just run a little better oiled when things are, in motion and things are going forward. But a lot of that is because these natural pauses can occur to really have the refuel throughout the day that allows me to sustain that. And that's just been learned over time of things that work and things that don't. But in this evening example is I find myself often at the bottom of the steps. And before I even walk up, I will take just a few, like literally a minute at the bottom of the steps, sometimes even less than that. And maybe it's a deep breath. Maybe it's a quick element of gratitude that I need. Maybe it's that I say a prayer before I walk upstairs because I need a little more strength than what I can give myself.
God, please help me before they attack.
It just depends. I mean, if the noise upstairs is a little loud and what I need is quiet in that moment, I'll stay there for a little bit longer. I'm like, Mom's doing laundry. Really, she's not. She's just standing at the bottom of the steps. But I think it's important, again, going back to the self-awareness of really thinking about, time is a gift. We are not guaranteed time. None of us. And it is a fleeting thing. And so if we look at it as, using it as like an investment, right? How can I use this time and invest something well in these moments that are going to serve me better, which allow me to serve others better? Then it becomes a win-win. So very simple example and kind of a rounded way to get there. But I think it's a great question, Cam, because, we do have things to do. We have things to get done. So me just saying we need to pause, well, what does that really look like? And the reality is it looks different for every single one of us. Maybe some people need more of a pause in the morning. Maybe it's midday. Maybe it's evening. Maybe it's little bits throughout the day. Maybe it's different on Monday than it is on Tuesday. I think we need to be dynamic. I think it's too much rigid when it comes to creating this concept of I need to check out. Kind of it sets us up for maybe a little bit of failure and isn't as sustainable as it could be. So often I just say check out so you can check in on purpose. Whatever that looks like for you, use that time well.
Awesome. And I love the fact that you said the pause after the meeting, discussion, or whatever. It actually, we were talking about this morning. My friend Giuliana was talking about how she, after a meeting, she takes 15 minutes to review the notes, put everything organized so that she has it ready to go, action steps and all these other things. And one of the most important things that we can all use with our electronics is how, if it's in the right spot, how do I go back and find it?
Yeah.
Because I've given her kudos because something came up and she's like, oh, that was from the last meeting. I've got the notes right here. I'm like, yeah, girlfriend, you're validating, and then that's so awesome. In that, what you mentioned, kind of mentioned this a little bit of how you learned this. Where did it come from? Was it a holy crap? I need these pauses, or was it you stumbled into it one day because nothing was going on, and you're like, hey, that felt pretty good.
Yeah. It's probably a combination of both, but to be honest, I think it's more in the former. I think like a lot of things, sometimes we do have to learn a little bit the hard way. And I don't mean that things have to necessarily be, super dire and hard. They just have to be hard to us. We talk about things like a definition of a word. And when I think about the word trying or hard or difficult, we all define that different, no different than we define stress or overwhelm or other words different. So what it was for me, to be honest, Otis, was getting to a place where I realized the people that I love the most, those in my house here, were getting not the best of me, sometimes the worst of me. And what I recognized is how much I was pouring out in any given day, and for good things, honestly. I don't say that from a prideful standpoint. I say that very humbly, but things that I genuinely love to do. I love working with people. I love helping people invest in themselves. I love helping people in general. But I wasn't paying attention to the number of things that were getting my yes. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that I really wasn't refueling myself in ways that I needed. So kind of the self-care. And I don't mean massages, facials, when people talk about kind of the long weekends, even though I do love a long weekend retreat and I host a couple of those each year, and they are fantastic ways to refuel, but they're not always in the everydays, right? Mm-hmm. So what I realized is that when starting Discover Yellow, not only was it incredibly close to my heart because I need it the most, but when I stopped telling myself the lie that I was the only one, it started to become a concept of this could become a business. And that was pretty exciting. So, yeah.
I'm curious, talking about the pausing and self-awareness, there's always something that comes to mind to me. And I don't think this is as much of I don't know, any sort of like philosophical thing where it's like, how do we do this? Because I think there is an answer there, but I think it's really difficult for people, which is understanding when you're lying to yourself or not. I think it's a Marcus Aurelius quote of like that lying to your or self-rationalization is the easiest and most deadliest sin or something like that. Like the idea of, you talk about like, what do I need? How do I perform best and all those kind of things? It's pretty easy to say, I do need that 12 hours of sleep. I don't really need to get up at 8. I'll just flex my schedule around all these kind of things. I don't really need to, I just don't work the best on Mondays or Tuesdays or Fridays really. So I'll just work Wednesdays and Thursdays. Like it's really easy to just kind of lie to yourself in that way, thinking you're helping yourself, but really you're kind of just setting yourself up for failure in that way. What have you done or how do you help clients to recognize when they are, lying to themselves on those kind of things versus like creating space for the genuine aspects of that self-care?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because as you say that, the immediate thing that comes to mind is, and I've heard people talk about this before, but, almost kind of show me your calendar and it'll tell me what's important to you, or, tell me what you did today and it'll sort of be very telling. And I think while I do think that's very true. And I do absolutely think we can rationalize whatever we want, right? When we stay in our own head. This to me is where the concept of coming together in community, which is a big, big core kind of foundational element of Discover Yellow. So we kind of sit on a couple pillars, which is self-awareness, living with intention, gratitude, and community. And I think the community piece, whether you're working one-on-one, because wherever there's more than one gathered, right, it becomes community, or you're in a small group, or you're in a larger team, or you're working in a facilitating or doing a strategy session, whatever it might be. But anytime you're with more than one person, I think becomes the opportunity where reflection and intention and action can really start to coexist. So if I ask all of us the same question of, tell me one thing that, surprised you about your day yesterday. I'm just making up a question as I'm thinking here. And we all took a few minutes to journal something down, and then we each shared. My guess is 2 things are going to happen. You're going to share something. We're all going to listen, and it's going to cause you to learn something about yourself. And it's going to cause us to think a little bit different about maybe what we thought about that question at first. So I guess what I would say is in terms of the rationalization, if you're staying in your own head and if you're keeping isolated in those ways, we can all fall guilty of it, right? We're going to do the things that naturally we're comfortable, we're good at, we have a rhythm or a cadence. And if we're not ever checking in to actually ask ourselves how those things are serving us, I really think we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? We might be falling into a pattern of a habit that's something that's just not serving us. And we don't recognize that until we're almost so far along that we're wondering, how did we get here? And granted, all those things can still happen even with a check-in, right? Because we still have to choose the action to make the left turn or the right turn or the turn around or the jump forward, whatever it is. But I think this is the beauty of the pause and the check-in. So each week, for example, on Instagram, I always do kind of a midweek check-in. I just call it a Take 5. It's a free opportunity to try to get people in a place of creating a natural rhythm of checking in at some point in their week. So there's a prompted couple questions. I'm actually changing it up a little bit this year, but a couple questions to get people thinking. And my hope with that would be not only would you think about it, but you'd talk to somebody about it. And that could be with your team, because these questions are universal. They're not necessarily super personal or super professional, right? They're just questions. And I'm a big, big fan of the power of a question. So
that's right. Ask a better question, get a better answer. One of my favorite things to say. I think Tony Robbins is who I got that from. If not, he probably. I was
going to say that one might go back. If
he would say it. He'd like it.
It might be Plato. Either Tony or Plato. I don't know which one.
One of those two.
Yeah, one of those two. So I'd love for you to tell us how you shifted out of the corporate security, because 16 years. I mean, that's a couple of days. Some habits built. Some comfort zones established. Was there a catalyst, or was it a smooth transition that you were in control of, and how'd you do it?
Yeah, great question. And I love when people ask me this question, because quite honestly, and I don't know exactly both of your work history per se, but if either one of you have been in a position or in a company or in a, industry for any number of years, right? You start to create, for better or worse, a little bit of identity around it. And you get really connected to the work. And that is a beautiful thing, right? I'm very passionate about being able to do this work. But what I started to realize a few years prior to actually leaving my job and starting Discover Yellow is there was definitely a recognition of loving the work and not necessarily feeling like I was doing it in the right place, if that made sense. And the organization I worked for was a fantastic organization, large, global, 50,000 plus employees, family run. And literally to the day that I was not there anymore, even at 50,000 employees, still had that culture. And so there was just a beautiful thing about feeling like you're in a company that really is taking care of you. And in return, you feel equally like you're taking care of them. So it becomes this relationship where it's kind of hard to leave, right? And there was nothing really pressing that said, now's the right time, until the company was acquired. And so I always tell people, and I'm just very transparent about this, especially, not that it necessarily matters, male or women, but especially when I have women ask me like, gosh, what was it like to start your own business? That seems really scary. And it absolutely was. And I don't necessarily stand on anything that says I'm super brave and I quit my job and I started my own business, because that is not how it happened. Through acquisition, my job was made redundant and I was let go. And in that time of being let go, you have that moment where you're at that picture that we all see, we use in presentations, where you're at that fork in the road, and you're standing there. And what I did first was go back to what I know. And I went and I started interviewing with companies to do professional development, assessment, executive assessment type work. And one of the individuals that was the hiring leader said to me, Jessica, I want to hire you, but you don't want me to hire you. And it honestly was the best gift that, from a professional standpoint, one of them anyway, that someone has ever given me. Because what I realized is, and Cam, this kind of goes maybe a little bit to that rationalization, right? I was in a place where I knew what was comfortable. I knew what I had a passion to do. And I knew that I knew nothing about starting my own business. So I went to what was comfortable. But when I was in these interviewing processes, it was pretty transparent, obviously, to other people, what I really wanted to do, which was start my own business. Yeah. So I left that call and decided I have to try it. Like, I have to try this. And it'll be, officially the LLC is 3 years old as of this January, which is fun to celebrate, but I launched in April. So it'll be in April, will officially be 3 years. So a little bit of a journey to get here. And I will say it hasn't been easy. I wasn't expecting it to be easy. It's been very humbling. It's been one of those things where I'm a collaborator by nature. I've always worked within teams. I've always, worked on teams. I've always worked with teams. And so there are elements of working on your own that can get a bit lonely. Thankfully, I know this about myself. So again, going back to that self-awareness, I look for ways to have the collaboration and to do things, even like this podcast, as example of ways to continue to network and to continue to grow. But all that to be said, there is a grieving process and leaving something that and really hold dear. There's people that are involved in that process that you miss dearly. And thankfully for LinkedIn, we can still stay connected. But it's been a super fun process. I really wouldn't trade it for anything. And again, I'm just so thankful for someone seeing through maybe some things that I was telling myself in my head and being pretty honest with me and holding that mirror and helping me with that nudge.
That's a pretty insightful interview to have happen.
Yeah.
Did you know the person, or was this like, no shit, she's looking at your resume, says, hey, bring this lady in, sits down, starts asking you questions, and then gives you that kind of feedback?
Yeah, great question. So no, I did not really know this individual very well. I did know the organization. They do happen to be licensed psychologists, and they do a lot of work in the executive assessment realm. So they obviously know how to ask good questions and get people talking.
Yeah.
And again, I just, I think probably just based on my faith too, I definitely am in a place always where like, I don't question so much the timing. I don't think things happen by chance. And so I've always seen him as a person where it was natural that I might have gone and done a couple of interviews and looked in that place where it just felt comfortable. So I really don't like hold any shame on myself or judgment there. That I understand why I did that, but I see the opportunity for someone to be honest with me as such a gift. And I feel like, as leaders, as, entrepreneurs in whatever space, when we get the opportunity to have people share their stories with us, like what a gift to be able to reflect back a little bit of what you heard so that one, they know you were listening, and two, you might be helping them to learn something that they just didn't see in themselves. So I feel like your podcast probably does that a lot for people.
I'm curious why discover yellow, and we kind of talk about the genesis of the idea and what you do, but the thing that I always find really interesting with people who choose the entrepreneurial route is you get into this. You usually, it's like I see a problem set. Take an example of, it's like there's hungry kids out there, right? And I could go and I could start a soup kitchen, or I could start a farm, or I could start educating people about agriculture and how to grow your own food. There are so many directions to go. What was it that led you this direction?
Yeah, I mean, good question. So I think what I'm doing now does not feel all that different than what I, have done all of my career in terms of developing and helping people. So the core elements of the work that I genuinely love to do, that I've invested, 20 plus years now in a career in leadership, talent development, professional development, coaching, all of those elements exist at Discover Yellow. I think the difference is me seeing the opportunity to maybe approach it from a different angle, not so much in the traditional type of corporate development when it comes to working with organizations, not in the traditional type of weekend self-care type wellness retreats when it comes to bringing women on a weekend away. I tell people, and I'm very transparent. So if you're a woman listening, or if you're a male and you're thinking about sending someone to a Discover Yellow retreat, our retreats are pretty amazing for a variety of reasons. And they do offer the checkout. They do offer, you're very well taken care of, and you're, an opportunity to be 3.5 days of kind of removing distractions, being in a community of other women, but they are work. We have workshops in the morning. We have free time in the afternoon, and we workshop in the evening, and we have a whole lot of fun. But I am all about learning and growth. I am all about increasing self-awareness. And quite honestly, I think if we are gifting ourselves 3.5 days away, we are doing ourselves a disservice if we're not using some of that time to learn about what season we're in, to learn about what's serving us well in the season of life that we're in, to learn and acknowledge maybe some passions we have in the next season we're entering into, to celebrate gratitude for where we are in life and who we have to do life with. Refuel in ways, find these opportunities for, okay, my day's crazy, but what are 3 ways I could maybe create a little bit of that pause or margin that would be meaningful? Maybe I need to think about asking for help. Maybe I'm not doing a great job of that. So all of those things combined into these types of workshops around self-care, mindfulness, margin, gratitude, inner critic, all of these elements, they make for a pretty fulfilling weekend where my hope is that people leave knowing more about themselves, feeling more connected to themselves, more connected to others, much less alone in the process, and that they have tools and mindsets that allow them to shift back into whatever their everydays look like in ways that, that make a difference long term. And I would say the same for internal, like corporate organizational workshops that I do as well. I'm not doing, I'm not talking about topics that are different than what you might, read, listen to podcasts, audiobooks, whatever it might be. We're talking about confidence and resilience and inner critic, mindset, all of those things the same. But my hope is that there's just a little bit different in the design, that people can go a little bit deeper, that people can feel comfortable about really getting charged up about the work that they get to do, not have to do, that they get to get charged up about the people that they get to work with, not have to work with. And all of it is that they learn more about themselves so that they can live and do life with greater intention. So
talk about those weekends. I'm curious. So Dad, we did this. What would it be? 3-4 weeks ago, we did the last Level Up Your Leadership Masterclass of 2024. We talked about resting actively. I was blessed enough to join you on those because you did the rest yourself. But I'm really curious, Jessica, to hear your perspective on that concept of resting actively, because you're talking about you spending 3.5 days out there and you're working, but you're saying these people come back recharged, but they were working that whole time. How does that work? Talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think from a female perspective, because the retreats right now are women only. I would love to maybe one day venture out and do a bit more of a corporate retreat or something like that, where I could bring teams and leaders into these retreats. But for right now, they're women specific. So I think one thing is an immediate goal is that people come in and they feel very welcomed and they feel very taken care of. So the way that happens is, we choose a beautiful location. We choose a house that is aesthetically pleasing, has all the, the comforts of home, but maybe elevated in the way of you don't have to do all the things, right? I actually do all of the cooking. I'm not a trained chef, but I genuinely love cooking. I love hosting. So I do all of the meal preparation, and people don't have to think about that. We have activities that, I choose locations that people can have a variety of activity options in the afternoon. Some people come and truly they just want to have time to sleep in a little bit. They want to have time to take a nap in the afternoon. They want time for, a book that they've been wanting to read and they just haven't had an opportunity to do that. Some people come more for the connection. So, the goal for everyone coming in and the reason for people coming is all over the place. And honestly, it's actually one of my favorite things about doing this work is I genuinely believe that anyone who's meant to be there will be there. And I love having the dynamic nature of people in all different seasons of life. So I've had everywhere from, I think 19 years of age is the youngest, all the way up to 74 was my oldest. And it is a beautiful thing when you see people come together and sort of just be, right? There's no, I don't need to be anything other than myself. Like everything, you're going to get out what you put in. So my acknowledgement, my invitation when people get there is, what do you need to check at the door so it doesn't impede your whole weekend? And what are you looking to get out of this? Because based on what you choose to put in, it has a direct return in what you can leave here on Sunday. So you come in on Thursday and you leave on Sunday. And the other thing is that the connection and the community, it's actually probably one of my favorite things. So I love, designing the retreats, the workshops, facilitating all of those pieces. But seeing people come in on Thursday who do not know one another, because oftentimes that is the case. But sometimes people do come knowing a couple people or a friend or a sister, but oftentimes they don't know many people. Sometimes people come, they don't know anyone there. And these retreats they're not super small, but they're not huge, but anywhere between maybe 9 and the biggest has been 17. So a decent sized group. The way that the retreat experience and the workshops and the type of conversations and the downtime, all of that fosters a community environment is something that I often say, not from a selling standpoint, but you kind of have to experience to understand it. So,
Right.
quote unquote, come and join us. But
you'll know it when you get here.
This is it. And seeing people leave on Sunday, we usually do, even Saturday night, we do an affirmation circle and I have people go around and just share, what's something special about spending this time together? What have you learned from someone here? What's the impact been on you? What have you seen a change in them? We don't often do that as much as we probably could. And it is incredible how in a time when you remove distractions and you get serious about learning something, like choosing to say, I have a hat on to learn something, what you can really observe.
To kind of bring it in, because I love that and it's a great answer. I'm curious, talking about kind of bottling that up to, let's say, a weekend, because I think, Dad, when we did that masterclass, we kind of used that as the easy example of what does your Friday, Saturday, Sunday look like in order to recharge for the work week and those kind of things there. What would you be your way of, kind of trying to bottle that up, those kind of different mechanisms you're talking about of making sure that people have the community, time to rest, time for the growth, and, still that kind of work at the same time, but then also resting and, kind of getting that balance there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I think in terms of the time at the retreat, it's everyone's choice, right? There's nothing that we really do there that is required. Of course, it's you know, I want people to come to all the workshops. We usually have some type of movement whether it's yoga or Pilates that's, offered at the sessions. We do something like, whether it be hiking or take a walk or different candle making, or some people choose to go get massage or whatever it is in the afternoon free time. We usually play, like after dinner, we might do a game or something fun. So it kind of depends on where people want to choose to plug in. My hope is that in the more structured elements, especially the reflective pieces, that everyone chooses to participate. So far to date, I have not had anyone not participate, so I'm hoping we're okay there. But I always give people the option, because quite honestly, it's your investment, right? I don't take the fact that someone is choosing to invest their time and their money with Discover Yellow or myself lightly at all. Like, I value the fact that someone would say, you know what, something about that sounds intriguing, so much so that I am willing to figure out a plan to be away from my family for 3.5 days. And I am willing to put some finances behind it to know that this is important. That right there, I think, is already that testament of, I see some value here and I'm curious. And that's all I need from someone, is to be a little bit curious in the process, to allow things to unfold. At the end of the retreat, we always do a re-entry workshop. And I think that is incredibly important. I didn't start doing that at first, and it was a learning, as we always have, right? A learning for me along the way. But the re-entry, even though you've only been gone a few days, and you guys probably know this, right? It's different. You come back a little bit different. You come back maybe knowing something or wanting to make a shift. And you also come back to everything that you left just a few days before. And those things, if we don't figure out a way to re-enter in purposeful ways and re-enter in ways that could be sustainable, like the retreat experience could feel very quickly forgotten, even just a few days later. And that, for me would just be a little bit sad, because you've taken time and money to invest in this. So I think, again, too, that's where the community is really important, because we usually have like active chats that are going, and, these women will stay actively connected, which is pretty cool to see, or just in our online social media community, which is really fun too. So, but I think, again, it comes back to a personal choice, like anything. We can come back and we have to choose. We have to choose what of, if anything, we learned that's meaningful enough to maybe make a shift in what we do different.
Yeah, that's so true. I've been to enough of those sort of conferences, leadership, whatever you want to call them. And, some of them will even talk about the fact that, I love the fact that you've identified that, to add that in, to make it more purposeful in that re-entry workshop, because, you come back from whatever it is, super motivated. You're going to do all these things.
Yeah.
Except you step back into the exact same situation and environment that you were in before. I mean, it's no different than an addict going away to rehab and coming right back to the exact same environment. And
right.
I don't know what the statistics are on that, but I'm sure it's pretty darn high that they're going to end up addicted again to the same problem, whether it's the same substance or not. I would love to shift gears because this phrase comes up more and more, and I want to tap into your expertise of this, and that is talent development. What kind of bigwig, pie in the sky sort of thing does that mean? Because it used to just be you're an HR, and here's your social training or whatever, those sort of trainings you had to do annually. What truly is talent development?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm going to give you my answer.
Well, that's what I want. Unless there's somebody hiding behind the table or something.
And I say that because I think this is very much, it's very much an opinion, but I think built on years of working in this space and seeing it evolve. And, both of you will know very well, there can be a variety of ways to describe doing the same thing and using buzzwords. So I remember even in my 16 years of working in talent development, you're right, traditionally just HR, then maybe add on of org development, then maybe add on of some org design, then add on of talent management or talent development. And they become these big umbrella terms, so much so that when you step into these roles, it becomes all these other duties assigned is what's really happening, because there's so much. But honestly, when you say talent development, the first thing that I think of is investing in your people, investing in the human side of the business, right? Less on the what and a little more on the how.
Mm-hmm.
Any reaction to that?
Well, I'm writing it down.
True.
That's the reaction. I mean,
No.
and it is, you had a beautiful opportunity with this business that you worked with for 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so many other organizations play the game, play the lip service to it.
Mm-hmm.
And what have you seen since stepping away from this? I mean, and quite literally from what you've described, I mean, it's one of those companies that nobody probably knew about, and how wonderful it was to work there, except for the people that were in there. And that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty unusual, because most people out there, because as humans, we tend to be the negative Nancy, and look for, and I'm not biased because there's negative Ned, which is even worse than Nancy. But that's what most people think and hear about.
Mm-hmm.
As you've stepped away and now you're looking at corporations from the outside in, how are you seeing more companies that are truly doing talent development,
Mm-hmm.
or more ticking the box?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a combination of both. Don't get me wrong. And there was nothing about even what we did internally that would be perfect by any stretch, right? Like nothing is perfect in that way. I do think that we did a really great job, and a great job evolving, and a great job of building out internal teams and making some external investments. So I think there was, there was a robustness to that, of course. I still think, though, at the end of the day, whether from my experience internal for many, many years, or even what I'm doing now, it is sort of where the rubber hits the road, where at the end of the day, if you're making these investments in your people and you're not allowing those investments to flourish, meaning coming back from leadership development programs, utilizing, maybe you've invested in an assessment and utilizing the terminology, making sure that the IDPs are actually being, followed through, all of those things, right? You're really not getting the value for your investment. And I hate saying that, almost, because obviously I want everyone to invest in leadership development and talent development. And, I used to do a variety of succession management related work. Now I'm doing, a lot of work in women's development programs, and they're great. They are great. But one of my first questions when I go in now, and I guess the beauty of being in a place where you don't have to say yes to every piece of work, right? Is you get to ask some questions and start to really understand the why behind why people are investing, what they want or think is going to be different, and how they plan to integrate this and really support these leaders after they attend. And you do see a difference there. There are some organizations where it's the right thing to do. Maybe that's check the box. Yeah. Go ahead,
No, I was going to say, I've done my interviews with CEOs and HR directors for the leadership articles. And one of the things that came up with a lot of them, that actually more the HR folks kind of talking up the ladder, I guess, because it matters for this, is this idea of you have to be like hemorrhaging money. You have to be losing people. You have to be like it has to be like they view like talking, I was talking with them specifically leadership development, not just, talent broadly, but they talk about it like you have to be hemorrhaging money. It has to be so bad because it's like a surgical intervention. We have to really fix these things. And every one of us three and folks like us that talk about it, it's more like to take that surgery analogy, it's more like a physical therapy type thing. Like we're trying to get you in the gym, we're trying to get you working so you don't have to get the surgery and those kind of things. What are your thoughts on why that kind of perception around it exists and why people kind of save it as like an emergency thing? Because the other thing is, and you could probably use this analogy with the surgeries also. If you don't take care of yourself, you just go get the surgery, you're going to go back, right? It's going to keep getting worse. If you're like, crap, we've lost how many people this year? Okay, we need to start talent development. We need, work on our retention, all these kind of things.
Right.
It ain't going to fix it, most likely. Like, it's probably going to keep being bad, So what are your thoughts on why that mindset exists?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And I wish it didn't exist. I think it is a reality that it does. And it is more reactive than proactive when we talk about, not only just making these investments, but really allowing these investments to thrive in developing talent. But I think a lot of it is because of the tangible, what's the word I want to use? Yeah, just being able to have that tangible, immediate gratification of, I know I invested in this, so I should see someone look different tomorrow. That doesn't happen. I used to always tell people this, and I don't know if I made it up or if I heard it, but I don't remember hearing it, so I think I did make it up. But when I would talk to leaders, we used to send our leaders to a pretty intensive 5-day, leadership development program, battery of assessments, long coaching sessions, all of those things. It's a wonderful program, really capstone. But I used to tell people, it is not a car wash. You don't go into this program dirty and come out clean. It's not a car wash. You have to recognize that when you go to this program, the best gift that you're going to get is self-awareness. The best gift. Then when you leave, you get to choose, because you are human, right? You get to choose what you do with what you learned. Do you take it back? Do you do something different? Do you make it real with your people? That is one of my favorite things to try to help people to say, if you go through this experience, whether it be an intensive development program, whether it be an assessment, whether it be some of the women's programs that I'm leading now, you owe it to your people to let them know a little bit about the experience, because they didn't get to have it. A little bit about what you learned, a little bit about what you want to work on. Be bold enough to say, hey, honestly, I got some really good feedback. Maybe some of the sessions have 360 feedback. I got some great feedback. Some of it was hard to listen to or it's hard to hear and read, but I want to work on said thing, right? Maybe it's how I show up in a room. Maybe it's, my executive presence, whatever it might be. I want to work on this. And I would love for you to know that I'm working on this. And I would love to open the door that when you see me doing it well, I would love for you to tell me. Or maybe when it's not great and I'm kind of falling back into patterns, find 2 or 3 people to make it real with and hold you accountable. That is honestly where the car gets clean, right? That's where the wash starts to happen. And I know that might be silly that I use that, but I feel like it just feels so fitting, because I think the expectation often is, if you're a sales team member and you walk in and you do the pitch and you make the sell, people know that you've made the sell, right? There instantly is the RFP. There's the process for, the negotiation. There's all the steps that follow. The sell has happened. So we celebrate that. But if you go and you develop, how do you know, right? How do you know? You look at what's different. You celebrate what's different. You celebrate the things that, you see that people are showing up just a little bit different than maybe before. So I don't know if that resonates with you guys at all, but it's always just held a little bit true. And the muscle piece, Cam, I would say, I just actually, with another former colleague of mine, we got to co-partner and do a women's development program, which we titled, it was all about confidence and resilience. And we ended up titling it Building the Leadership Muscle. Because when you said that about the gym reference, it is so true. We have to constantly be recognizing that development isn't a one-time thing. It isn't like you just have the most delicious meal and you're never going to be hungry. You're going to be hungry tomorrow morning. And so, thinking about walking into that gym, if you've not worked out, picking up that 30, 35, 50-pound weight, even a 10 sometimes is a little bit hard. And if you don't constantly work those muscles, they're not going to be growing. And we don't usually walk into a gym and only work our right bicep. We've got to think about what the parallels are. So in this case, it was confidence and resilience. They work together. Both muscles, constant action. So they just fit, but I think it really is the opportunity to help people understand that. And actually, that's part of the work that I love to do, both when I was internal and now having Discover Yellow, is helping people with that sobering reality of, yes, this is an investment you're going to make. And if we can do it in a proactive way, here's some things that I think could really shift. But we have to be willing to allow them to shift, because it's not going to just happen right away.
What it brings to what it brings to mind for me, Dad, write this down as a record. It is 49-33 on the recording, and I'm mentioning rugby for the first time. So that is the furthest I have gone. I think that is my new record. But I was having a conversation with some coaches last night, and we were talking about recruiting and development around the country and these kind of things. Something that the rugby community cares a lot about, and there's a similar thing to what we talk about with like the leadership development. Everyone's like, we want to develop rugby. We want to grow the game. We want to, the World Cup's going to be here in not that long. And it's like, we got to get some players up. We got to build the pipelines, all these kind of things. And then you talk with some of these players, and I'm not going to name any players or any clubs, but you talk to some of them and you go, okay, what was it like in your high school club? And to use one example, it's a first 15 starters, the varsity, to use non-rugby terms, the varsity team was getting all the training and they were getting helped. And the kid that we have from the varsity team, he's got some skills. There was a kid that was on their JV team and they literally didn't get coached, he told me. Blows my mind. And I started thinking, it's like, why the heck? What kind of coach, what kind of leader would go and just consciously like, yeah, go over there and play. I'm busy over here. And the thing that came to mind is just this like short-sightedness of, I don't need them right now. Like, thinking to take like a position, like if you're the fourth in line for that position, I got 3 guys that are really good above you. I don't really need you that much. Why would I spend time developing him? And I'm curious, Jessica, if you think there's a similar kind of thing that happens outside of the business, that it's like, yeah, he just kind of does this thing over there. Yeah, she's just doing her. Yeah, we're fine over there. We don't really need them to develop into this big piece. And then the other piece of that is, would you agree that's just as short-sighted? Because in sports, of course, it's pretty obvious. You get a couple injuries. Now you got a kid who doesn't know how to play that you're starting, right? It happens pretty obviously. Business is a little bit sneakier there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so no, I think it is a reality, absolutely. And I think it is, I've worked with a variety of leaders, of course, as you guys probably have as well over the time in our careers. But, when I think about some of the best leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last 20 years, it's those that are doing the exact opposite of what you just described. And so I think we know that, right? Developing your bench is so important. And what that looks like is going to be different for each person. And that goes back to kind of that talent development, right? It's seeing humans as humans. We are not robots that just get turned on in the morning and turned off, off in the afternoon. Like, we aren't just people who show up professionally without bringing any of our personal stuff with us. I think COVID maybe taught us a little bit of that as well, especially people working from home more. You got a little sense of the personal environment and things. But I think when you're not recognizing the strength of the team at whatever levels, you have the opportunity and visibility to, yeah, I do think it is a missed opportunity in those ways. The other thing too is that, and again, I'm not sure if I should be saying this because it doesn't lend me any money when I say this, but development doesn't have to be super sophisticated, expensive, time consuming. It doesn't at all. Like, think about, in this scenario with the team, could be true of a leader as well. You have a rising star. You have somebody who is really like showing some effort. They're maybe they haven't played the game as long, or in our case here, maybe they haven't led as long, or they haven't been in role as long. But you see there's motivation. You see there's desire to grow. There's something about them that just catches your eye. Well, if you have another leader on the team, or you have another, team out with this part of the organization, what about some cross-training? What about giving them some visibility? Those things, they do cost something. I guess they cost time. That's one resource. We can't discredit that. But when it comes to the financial element, what does it really cost to allow some of these to occur? What does it cost to give somebody a little bit more visibility? Meaning, I might want to bring you in on this project. And honestly, I can't say how much you're going to be involved, but I think you're going to learn a lot in the process. Be transparent with that. I think the same could be very true for all the sports things you're talking about. So yes, I think it happens. I think really great leaders do it different, and they do recognize the ability. And I don't think that leadership development, talent development needs to be overly shiny, expensive, or take a lot of time, which again is kind of the benefit too of coming in, into these organizations and being able to customize a solution that can meet their needs or their budget. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do. I mean, I can design programs all day long, and I love doing that. And it's easier to kind of facilitate something over and over because it's less time consuming on my part. But I'm not doing an organization any service if I come in and I just sell them something that isn't going to meet their needs. Like, I'd rather stay with them longer term, come in and do a smaller piece of work, get them thinking creatively and figure out how we can be a partner and stay around a bit longer. So I don't know if that matches kind of where you're going with that, Cam.
And it sounds like you're saying that if you have a culture around development and taking care of your people, that then you don't need to spend all this money because they'll take care of it. That's a crazy idea there, Jessica. I don't know where you got that.
Well, I'll validate it. I mean, one of the things that, depending on who was in charge, who was the commander at the time, that we did even in the Army, who has, or which has, has one of the most robust leadership development programs for people that are in the Army. I mean, all these schools that you go to where that's all you're doing. But you know what else we did is we would do things that didn't cost anything or cost very little. Like, all right, there's a stack of 20 books. We're all going to read this and we're going to discuss it, once a week or whatever. You're in charge and you're going to teach this class or just little things like that. Cross training, another thing that we've talked about many times. These are all just things that the true investment in what you're talking about, the dollar investment is so low, but the return on it is so much higher. I think it's easy to get wrapped around the solution of buying something. Look at me. I sent you to this leadership development seminar. Paid $500. Where's the results?
Yeah.
How about take that $500 by, I don't know, what's the math on that? 50 books, something like that, and have a group discussion about it. I don't know. So many more variables if you just commit to developing your folks and taking care of them and setting them up for success.
Yep. And when you do that and you build that culture, you set those standards, get everyone understanding it, and then they can help each other with it. Like, I'm thinking of the rugby examples of, all these different things I talk about. Every time I'm coaching something, I coach it several times and I get them all up to speed. And then there's a certain point where I go back and say, hey, how was that, guys? And they all go, no, tell me, how do you think that was? Was it good enough? No. What did I say 3 weeks ago? We said this, this, this. Are they doing any of those three things? No, they're not. All right. Then why do I need to come over and tell them? We should all work together. And it's like, when you get that kind of a culture, then that's where you have people who are really going to help to develop everyone else inside the team. And it does so much for it. And I think, kind of to your point earlier, Jessica, it doesn't take that much money when you have the culture aspect of it and you are really, making it something that, you're embodying as a team.
Right. Absolutely. It makes me think about, just because we're in a new year, right? So people get I'm not a New Year's resolution person per se. If you are, that's great. But it makes me think about the number of quick investments people make in a new year because they want to set these resolutions, and whether it be health and wellness or organization or, whatever it might be. And I think the same thing, right? It's the same thing is true as we're talking about that parallel to development, right? If it's important enough to you, you're also willing to be creative in how you approach it, because the financial piece may just not always be there. I mean, there's a lot of organizations, especially smaller ones, that they do want to grow their team, but they also, if they spend too much money there, they may not have a business. And then therefore people aren't going to have jobs. So there are realities around smart business decisions and where you're putting finances that I think are very important. But I think that also sometimes allows us to, get even more creative and allow other people to step up and lead. I love the idea of the, kind of the book club that you mentioned, Otis, because I think, what better way? And not only what people are learning, but think about how people are connecting and collaborating in that too, like the team development of that, which is so beyond just the leader development, right?
Which is what actually solidifies everything they learn. Dad, you've said this before. Maybe we had somebody on the podcast who said it about how much you remember that you get told versus how much you remember that you teach somebody. And that when you are out there and you're looking for things for everyone else, it helps you to understand it for yourself, and you build that reciprocity. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to coach a team or we're going to go teach a class. I feel like fired up. We're ready.
I'm ready to coach. Training camp
I've never played rugby, so I don't think I should coach that, but I'm a great cheerleader.
It's easy. I picked it up in no time.
Yeah,
no time. So in learning, because that's what you got to do if you're coaching, right? You just got to be one day in front. But all joking aside, I love the car wash analogy. That is so true, and such a great thing. So that's what I learned is the car wash analogy. Cam, how about you? What'd you learn?
We need to talk after this, Dad, and figure out how to merge that with Zach Montroy's about buying the Ford Focus, expecting the Ferrari type of thing. They're close enough. We got to put those together. So we'll brainstorm after this.
That's right. The book club, the spending all the money for the book and just expecting it to happen, right?
Yeah.
That's the Ford Focus versus the Ferrari.
Oh yeah. But no, for me, talking about the idea of resting actively, and Jessica, you talking about your retreats, the piece that I don't think we touched on in our masterclass, Dad, was how much important the community aspect is for rest and feeling that connection with your community, with your family. There's lots of different communities that you can connect with, but how important that is for helping you to feel recharged and connected, and how much that helps you to then go hit that next week more aggressively. Aggressively is right. Better. Hit it better. There we go. We're at the end of the show. Give me a break.
That's all good. I love that. I love learning. It's the whole discover, right? So I feel like I have one for each of you, if that's okay. So,
but I got to ask you. I have to ask you. Don't steal my thunder from.
I won't. Go ahead, please.
What did
this is his favorite part of the show.
Go again. Sorry, Otis. Could you say that again, please?
What did you learn, Jessica?
What did I learn? So I two things stand out to me. Cam, I love your, and I'm forgetting the exact word you use, but it's sort of, the narrative we tell ourselves, that sort of what can be in our head and where we can justify where we're at versus maybe where we think we should be or where we want to go or whatever that looks like. I think personally, it's something I always have to be aware of, but I know that I'm not alone there. I think it's something we can even help other people in the listening. So I love that you reiterated, like, we can tell ourselves whatever we want to hear, and that may then have a behavior that may not align with what we want it to be. So that is really good. Otis, I'm just calling out the idea of the creative solutioning. I think just sharing some of your expertise and some of your experience in what you did, in the military, of just getting creative with solutions. I feel like this is where we as consultants, as people in this human development, this talent development space, have the ability to really have purposeful impact, is when we can be creative. So I love that you shared experience, and I guess my thought there is that experience had an impact on you, which if you're making these suggestions to other people, like, that's coming through and they get more excited about it. And that excites me. So thank you for sharing.
Awesome. Jessica, how do folks find you, follow you, see when that next retreat is?
Yeah, great. Well, I wish I had the next retreat planned. I'm going to be very honest that life is just life right now. But retreats will likely be happening fall of 25. I've got 3 on the radar. One might be in a collaboration with another organization, which would be super fun. So stay tuned there. But best way to stay connected is through social media. So Instagram, it's at discover.yellow. Facebook, it's just at discoveryellow. Certainly on the website, which is just discoveryellow.com. I also am on LinkedIn, but not as much. Maybe a little bit more this year is coming there. But there is a Discover Yellow page, or just Jessica Adams is where you can find me. And through social media is really where I post all of the upcoming. I'm a big fan of, a lot of things in person when I can make that happen, but also I know that the virtual piece has a reach that we cannot argue, right? Last year, I actually hosted a free Mother's Day workshop, and there was a woman from Kenya that joined. And I just love the ability, as much as I'd love to be in person, I love the ability that, the virtual piece, it really does have the ability to impact and touch people in so many ways. So always stay connected on social media, because anything that I'm offering will be put out there, and you can check it out that way. But it's been wonderful. So
awesome. Jessica, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for sharing stories and allowing me to share too. Thank you.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Jessica Adams, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, a full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.